Good morning, students. Welcome back to class. Welcome back to school. So it's been long, I've not seen you guys. I hope that you had a good time during the holidays. So since this is our first class, I have to warmly welcome you back to campus and to remind you not to forget that school is serious business and that you must take your studies seriously so that you have results at the end of the day. So this course is entitled, ELS 241, Survey of English Literature Part 1. ELS 241, Survey of English Literature Part 1. That suggests that there's a second part of the course in the second semester. So, in the course, we study the literature of the English people. All right? In the course, we study the literature of the English people, spanning the ages, epochs, and eras. So first of all, we mentioned the character of the age. We mentioned the ethos of the age. That's the first thing we do. We talk about the character of the time, the ethos of the age, character, ethos, or even the zeitgeist. Okay? Which means spirit of the time. And then we now discuss the important literary texts of that time in relation to the spirit of the age, in relation to the ethos of the age, or the epoch we are talking about. So that's how the course works. For the first part of this course, we are going to dwell on 3 epochs, 3 eras, 3 ages, 3 periods. We are going to dwell on the classical period, We are going to dwell on the medieval period, and then the Renaissance. 3 ages. The classical period. Everybody say period. Period. Then the medieval period. And then the Renaissance. The Renaissance period. I am going to handle the classical period. We are 3 on the course. 3 lecturers on the course. So, my humble self, I will take the classical period. I think Dr. Michael Sukwa will take the medieval period. Dr. Denwan will take the Renaissance period. So I begin my task. And I want to talk about the classical period. Now, when we get to the second part of the course, we move away from the Renaissance. We talked about the neoclassical period, all right? And then the Romantic period, and then the Victorian period, okay? That's what will be, those are the three periods we'll handle in the second part of the course. The neoclassical period, the Romantic period, and the Victorian period, okay? There are other periods after that till the modern period. That's why we have the novel in the modern world that will take care of the novel in there from the 20th century. So, but then let's go back to the beginning of the beginning, right? Let's return to the beginning of the beginning, which is the classical period. Now, one thing you need to note is that the classical period is not an age in English literature. The classical period specifically is not a period in English literature. Since we did not really have the English people at this time in human history. You get it? We not really have the English people in the classical period. It was the time of the Greeks and the Romans. It was the time of the Greeks and the Romans. But we have to begin with the classical period because we believe that you cannot understand the literature of the other ages. You cannot appreciate the literature of the latter ages without having some idea about the literature of the classical period. Because the classical period informs the creativity of other ages after it. That's why it's important for you to study the classical period. For instance, when you are to be taught the Renaissance literature, they will keep making reference to the classical period. And you'll be wondering, what is this classical period? So that gap has to be filled. Okay? Initially, when we had this outline, it started with medieval period. But I thought it was necessary to have the classical period. You cannot understand, you cannot have a good knowledge of literature without going back to the ancients. And who are the ancients? The classical guys. Right? The guys who existed in the classical period. So as I said, when we are talking about the classical period, we are referring to the period of the Greeks and the Romans. And we are talking about the 5th, specifically the 5th and the 4th centuries BC. Talking about the 5th and the 4th centuries BC, before Christ. Before Christ. Before Christ. Some people use BCE. Some people use BCE, which means before the Common Era. And we use BCE because we want to be religiously neutral. And note how we Note how we move from fifth to fourth. Mention fifth first, before we mention fourth, because that's how we count years in the classical period. We count down, and we count up. From AD, we count up. So what is the character of the classical period? What is the zeitgeist of the classical period? What is its ethos? What are the characteristics of the age? How will you define the classical period? What are the things that make the classical period classical period? That's what I want to talk about first of all, because we have to define the age first before we talk about its literature. Because the literature of the age, the philosophy of the age, the character of the age is in its literature. It's embodied in its literature. The character of the age, the zeitgeist of the age are all embodied in its literature. If you read a people's literature at a particular time, it tells you everything about them at that particular time. That's what you need to know. So the classical period was marked by perfection, the strive for perfection in all human endeavor. Classical period was marked by the strive for perfection in all human endeavor. When we talk about the classical period, we are talking about the time of Aristotle, the time of Plato, the time of Socrates, the time of the great writers like Sophocles. Talk about the time of Homer, Ovid. Theocritus, Virgil. So the classical period was marked by perfection. In fact, today when we say that something is classical, we are trying to liken it to the perfection noted in the classical period, characterized by the classical period. We say that a book is classic. We mean that it is the best of its kind, and that it can stand the ravages of time. It's timeless and universal. That book is timeless and universal. A book that will never die. A book that continues to be useful across the ages, across time, across space. So how do we know that the classical period was an age that was marked by perfection? We know that because of its continued influences down the ages. All human discipline, all fields of knowledge like to trace their roots back to the classical period. That's what you need to know. All discipline, including literature, like to trace their roots back to the classical period. Because we believe that whatever we are doing today must have been done in one way or another by the ancients before us. They started it all. So that's how influential the age is not only on science like astronomy and mathematics, physics, but also literature. In fact, it is believed that the greatest literatures were written in the classical period. Of course, when you get to an age like neoclassical period, the neoclassical scholars will tell you, if you want to write a good work of art, go back and study the ancients. And who do they refer to as the ancients? They're talking about, so you should study the classical writers. One modern philosopher by name Alfred Whitehead once said, Alfred Whitehead once said that all of Western philosophy is but a footnote to Plato. A modern philosopher by name Alfred Whitehead once said that all of Western philosophy is but a footnote to Plato. So this statement by Whitehead accounts for the extent of the influence that the classical period has on the ideas and thoughts of other ages that came after it. All of Western philosophy is but a footnote to Plato. Meaning that whatever thought we have today in Western philosophy can be traced to the philosophy of Plato. One writer also said that the Greeks invented nearly all the literary patterns which we use. That was in philosophy. This is now in literature and criticism. The Greeks invented nearly all the literary patterns which we use. The person is Gilbert Higgett. Gilbert Higgett, in a 2015 publication, noting the influence that the classical period had on literature, or has on literature, wrote, and I quote, "The Greeks invented nearly all the literary patterns we use today: tragedy and comedy, epic and romance, and many more." So in Gilbert Higgett's statement, we see that classical influences permeated all aspects of human endeavor, including literature. You are talking about tragedy today, you trace it back to Aristotle. He was a classical guy, right? You are talking about space travel today, you go back to the classical period. The astronomy, that was a very that was of utmost interest to the ancients. It began then. The interest in the solar system. So that is why the classical period is important to all disciplines. That's why it is important for you to study it. You will not understand the literature of the Renaissance if you don't understand classical period literature. Now, what was the philosophy that was responsible for life in the classical period? The philosophy is called humanism. As the name suggests, humanism is a philosophy that is interested in human beings. Humanism is a philosophy that centralizes human concerns. It is a philosophy that believes in the power of man, power of human beings, to create and recreate the world, to suit the desire and expectation. Humanism emphasizes love for all human beings. Humanism emphasizes love for all human beings. And this happened at a time when kings or emperors waged wars, waged countless wars in order to expand their empires, resulting in the death or resulting in violence and bloodshed. Resulting in violence and bloodshed. Humanism places emphasis on the value of the human person. Humanism places emphasis on the value of the human person, the value of human life. It emphasizes love among humanity. Humanism emphasizes excellence in arts and literature. Humanism emphasizes excellence in arts and literature. Humanism as a philosophy catered for mostly human concerns. That is why in the classical period, that is why when we study the medieval period, we will know that the medieval period occurred as a result of the laws of the light of the classical period. When the Roman Empire had a crack and was divided. The laws of that light led to the medieval period. The light of civilization, light of scholarship, light of humanism, resulted in the medieval period, which was a kind of a dark age where human beings went back in time instead of going forward. because they lost the light of enlightenment that went with the humanism of the classical period, owing to the crack and the division in the Roman Empire. So the result was a society that was mostly regulated by religion and religious rules, lacking the light of humanism, which was interested in the human person, the excellence of the human person, the dignity of the human person, and the height that the human mind could reach if it focuses attention on peace, love, and creativity. So let us begin by looking at the humanism of Plato. The philosophy of humanism is found in the ideas of the scholars of the time. The humanism of the classical period is found in the ideas of the philosophers of the time. One of them is Plato. One of them is Plato. Plato lived between 427 and 347 BC or BCE. So Plato was a Greek philosopher. His teacher was Socrates. His teacher was Socrates. His teacher was Socrates. Socrates taught Plato. Plato taught Aristotle. Aristotle taught Alexander. So most of Plato's ideas are contained in these texts: Ion, Crito, and the Republic. Most of the ideas advanced by Plato concerning literature are contained in Ion, Crito, and the Republic. For instance, Plato believed that reality is spiritual. Plato believed that reality is what? Spiritual. The ultimate reality is spiritual. This is what he called the one, or the ideal. This is what he calls the one, or the ideal, or the ideal. For Plato, ultimate reality is what? Spiritual. Spiritual. He believes that the world as we know it, the material world as we know it, is what? Is fake. It's not original. The original world is in the spiritual realm, which is the world of forms. Which is the world of forms. So, for Plato, this death exists in the material world because its original copy is in the spiritual world. Without that, you won't see this one. Okay? That's his idea. So the ultimate reality is what? Spiritual. Amen, somebody. So Plato had a school. Plato had a school, kind of university, that he called the academy. Plato had a school, philosophical school, called the academy. At the entrance of this school, Plato had an inscription that says, "Let no one enter here who is not a geometer." Let no one enter here who is not a geometer. A geometer is a philosopher or one who is schooled in the art of logic and reasoning. So because Plato believed that the ultimate reality is material, then he sees literature as an imitation of imitation. Write it down. Plato saw literature as an imitation of imitation. Plato saw literature as an imitation of an imitation. Because you see, the material world is already fake. It's already an imitation of the spiritual world or the world of form. And then the artist tries to copy or imitate the material world, the world that we see, making what he copies to be an imitation of an imitation. So if I ask you, how did Plato describe literature? What will you say? As an imitation of an imitation. Okay? Good. We saw literature as being 2 steps removed from reality. Plato saw literature as being what? 2 steps removed from reality. Remember that in the classical period, reality is synonymous with truth. Don't be a witness. Write something down. Don't be a witness. Write something down. Participate. Be active in class. Don't be an onlooker. Don't be a passerby. Be an active member of the class. So literature is 2 steps removed from reality. Because the poets, he uses the word the poets to refer to writers. But the poet imitates an imitation. And remember that reality is synonymous with what? Truth in the classical period. So if the classical philosopher says that they are searching for the truth, what are they looking for? Searching for reality. They say they are looking for the ultimate reality, they are looking for the truth. So truth and reality are synonymous for the ancient guys. So Plato said that literature could not possibly embody truth, since it was an imitation of an imitation. Literature could not possibly embody truth, since it was what? An imitation of an imitation. At a point, Plato was of the opinion that writers should not be allowed in society. Writers and their work should be banished because they don't tell the truth, they lie. He sees literature as fiction. Plato sees literature as what? As fiction. Lies. That which is not true. Remember, they were looking for the truth. So the idea of literature as fiction goes back to Plato. And if you see literature as fiction, that means literature is a lie. Literature tells a lie. And lies are not needed in the Republic. At some point, Plato revised his theory and says that only morally upright literature, only morally upright writers and their works should be allowed in the Republic. Okay, because he said that in the epic, even the gods lie, and that will not be a good example for the youth. All right? Remember that Socrates was made to take the hemlock, kind of poison, because they accused him of lying to the youth. They accused him of poisoning the minds of the youth. So at first, Plato said that literature and the writers should be banished from the ideal republic. Later, he revised the theory and said that only writers who are morally upright and those whose work supports the state should be allowed to remain. Okay? And the ones who must be allowed to remain. So, another thing that comes out of this discussion is that censorship of literature or censorship of cultural production began with Plato. The need to regulate what writers write began with Plato. You cannot just allow any literature to get into mainstream society. Because literature has effects on the people, really the young man. Today, when you are finished making your film, it has to go through the censorship board. The censorship board will now rate the movie 16, 18, and so on and so forth. Now, trace that censorship back to Plato when it says that these authors' works must be what? Must be morally upright and must be regulated by the state. So the literature has to serve a higher purpose in society, not just entertainment. That's Plato said. Literature has the role to shape the mind of the individual. It is not something that shapes the mind, teaches moral lessons, then probably shouldn't be literature. Shouldn't be allowed to exist. So, perhaps the most important work of Plato is the Republic. So what you need to understand that Plato was not favorably disposed to literature. He condemned literature because he thought that it was a lie. And that was because of his philosophy. The idea that ultimate reality is spiritual. In the Republic, the main character, the main character in the Republic is Socrates. The main character in the Republic is Socrates. The Republic is written in dialogues, just as most works were written in that time. The Republic is written in dialogue. The Republic raises many themes. Plato's Republic raises many themes. One of them is the relationship between justice and happiness. One of the themes of the Republic is the relationship between justice and happiness. The argument is that the person who lives a just life is likely to live a happy life. The argument is that the person who lives a just life is likely to live a happy life. The good guy is likely to be happy. So justice applies not only to the individual but also to society. Justice applies not only to the individual but also to society. Sometimes we ask whether certain things that leaders do in society are just. And then some people come out and say, we need justice. Justice for Esther. So you understand that when you cry justice, justice, it goes back to who? Plato. I've already talked about it. And how to achieve justice. So, in a republic, Plato was trying to build the ideal society. In fact, you can call the work an ideal republic, the ideal republic. Alright? So, what would an ideal republic look like? It would be a perfect society where things work well. Alright? Where things work well. For instance, Nigeria is an ideal republic. Right? Plato was trying to build the Calipolis. You can spell it. The Calipolis. K-A-L-L-I-P-O-L-I-S. The Calipolis. The Calipolis is the ideal city in Plato's Republic. Ideal city. The ideal city in Plato's Republic is the Calipolis. The Republic by Plato is organized in 10 books. Organized in what? 10 books. 10 books. We are going to summarize each book. I'm not saying that the Republic by Plato is organized in 10 books. Organized in 10 books. In book 1, Socrates and Glaucon visit Paris to attend a festival in honor of the Thracian goddess Bendis. At Polemarchus' house, Socrates speaks to Selyphilus about old age, wealth, and justice. One of the important themes raised in this book 1 is the Socratic method. Socratic method, which I've talked about. The Socratic method consists of a series of questions and responses, which Socrates used in teaching people. For instance, when Cephalus claims that justice is about being truthful and returning what one owes, Socrates follows this definition by asking if it would be just to return weapons one owes to a mad friend. You collected weapons from your friend. After some time, the friend became mad. Is it right for you, because you want to do the right thing, to take back those weapons to the friend? When Polemarchus claimed that justice is helping one's friends and harming one's enemies, Socrates asked if this also applies to medicine and cooking. Thrasymachus, another character in the Republic, defines justice as the advantage or benefit of the strong. The best rulers are reluctant to rule, but do so out of necessity, as they do not wish to be ruled by an inferior person. The just man is wise and good, and the unjust man is ignorant and bad. So knowledge leads to justice. Knowledge leads to right living. Ignorance leads to mistakes. And perhaps injury to others. Injustice produces internal disharmony, which prevents effective action. These are the summary of book 1. Book 2. In book 2, we have the character Adeimantus. We have the character Adeimantus, who explains Glaucon's defense of justice. In Socrates' defense of justice, he states that human beings enter political life since each is not self-sufficient by nature. That is the political arrangement where you choose certain people who you think are better than you to think for you and help you live a good life. The important thing to know about book 2 is that the guardians are the army that should protect the city, the Callipolis. The guardians, write it in initial capital G, the guardians. That is a select army that should protect the city. The guardians are the elite of society, the selected member of society who are knights, who are soldiers, who are able to think for the city and protect the city and lead the city. Plato says that the guardians should be like dogs. They should be gentle on the citizens and harsh on the enemies. But in Nigeria, that's not the case, because the guardians in Nigeria are very harsh on the citizens, very gentle on the enemies. For instance, they give constant power to a neighboring country, but we don't have light. The constant power that another country enjoys comes from us, but we don't have the land. You get? Plato says that the education of the guardian is paramount, very important. Plato places high premium on the education of the guardian. There's high premium on the education of the guardian. That means that the leader must be highly educated. So this is why nothing is working in Nigeria. All right? We constantly choose leaders who don't have certificates, or who keep looking for that certificate until that tenure is over. Well, mean that their education is in question. It's questionable. They have questionable education. So from classical time, there was a lesson that we should learn, that the leader has to be a highly educated person. The education of the guardian is very important. But in the 21st century, we elect people whose education that we are not sure of. So we are back, we are not even in the medieval period. We are far back. We are in the time before Adam and Eve. Right? In book 2, we also learned that poetry should be censored. There should be censorship of poetry. That means literary production should be regulated. Literary production should be what? Regulated. Because of what Plato has already said about literature. Poetry should be censored to guarantee the proper education of the guardians. That means only works that lead to the moral edification of the youth should be allowed in society. He says that in poetry, the gods should be represented as good forces so as to act as examples to the younger generation. But in the poetry of that time, the gods were seen as liars. They tell lies, they plot, they scheme, and all of that. Book 3. In book 3, we have more rules on poetry, on literature. Remember, the word poetry is synonymous with literature in the classical period. Poet is a writer. Poetry is literature. The leaders of the city should be selected from the guardians. Not everybody can lead. Not everybody can be leaders. Only the best of the best should lead society. Our leaders should be intellectually sound. They should know the issues, the history of society. Not necessarily money bags who can buy all the books in elections. So only the best of the best from the guardians should be selected to be leaders. So the guardians are already a select group of people who have been well trained. But then leaders should be chosen from the best of them. So you can imagine such a society. That's what you have in an ideal society. Your leaders must be educated. You must always ask for the educational pedigree of your leaders. You get it? Right. Otherwise, you always have the balabulu economy that you have right now, because you cannot be different from the quality of the economy cannot be different from the quality of the leaders. We also have the myth of metal. The myth of metal. What's the myth of metal? It is believed that every human being has a metal in them. Every human being could be rated in terms of the quality of the metal in them. Right? So let's see. Gold are those who are natural rulers. Gold are those who are natural rulers. Silver are those who should be guardians. Bronze are those who should be farmers and other crafts. I think that Plato was highly biased and highly how will you call it? He was one who believed in the stratification of society. Plato's society was highly stratified. Was highly what? Stratified. And what is a stratified society? It's a society that is divided into classes. And there are strict lines, and you know your class immediately. Okay? You know your class immediately. For instance, Plato's society was divided between the upper class members and lower class members. That's the nobles and the peasants. And you knew immediately you were born, whether you were a noble or a peasant. And you were going to remain like that throughout life. You could not change it by any means. Okay? It was that bad. Because then, birth was what? Destiny. Birth was what? Destiny. In Plato's time, the class of the parent decides the class of the child. And you're going to remain like that till the end of time, the end of life. You are born to a king, you are going to be a king. Right? You're already in the class of nobles. You're born to a peasant farmer, you're a peasant and you're going to work in the farm for the rest of your days. Alright? Not now that farming is a dignified profession. Okay? In Plato's time, the farmers were lowly placed people who worked for kings. So now you can lift yourself through education, though most of you don't take your education seriously. It's a tool for moving from one class to another. You get it? Which is why you should not joke with your education. Because that's a way to change your class. Education has a way of changing your circumstances. So the kings had noble blood, the blue blood. The peasants had black blood. Okay? And nobility signals righteousness instantaneously. And being a peasant signals suffering. Everything devilish. Okay? So that's why we are still fighting with class till today. We are still fighting with class. Class is very difficult to defeat in our time, even in our time. Okay? The thing about class is that it's not measured by one's humanity, it's measured by material things. Okay? So you look at someone says, my rich watch, this is 10,000 pounds. It's 10,000 pounds, just the watch. And you merely feel inferior, right? So the worth of the individual is determined by material things, not by the person's humanity. And the person will say, so because you cannot wear a watch of 10,000 pounds, you cannot be my friend. You're not of the same class. Right? You're not my class. You can come close to me. See who's talking. Right? When my wristwatch can buy your house. My wristwatch is costlier than your car. And the individual, the victim of the class will definitely feel inferior. Because it's not humanity that speaks. At that point, it's material thing. So that's the sin. That's what's wrong about class. human worth human dignity is measured by material things, not by humanity that we talk about in the classical theory. Human worth should be measured by character. Human dignity should be measured by character, not by material. So we still fight this battle till today. Battle of class. The peasant, the guardians will not have private properties. That was one of the rules. Book 4. Book 4. There should be neither too much wealth or too much poverty in the Calipolis, because each extreme can cause social instability. Extreme poverty can bring chaos. Extreme wealth can bring chaos. Maybe that's where our leaders have placed us in Nigeria. You don't suffer too much, so you not cause a lot of problems. You know, when it seems that it's going to do too much, they adjust it. You know, so you don't know how much you're suffering. The only thing is that the leaders have more wealth, they have extreme wealth, insane wealth, to the detriment of the masses. That's an unjust society. Okay? You have a society where sort of people are so rich, and the other side so poor. Know that that's an unjust society. Okay? Plato didn't want that in the Calipolis. Okay, can cause problems, can cause violence, can cause destruction, can cause insecurity, just as we witness in Nigeria today. Kidnapping, violence, slaughtering people for human organs. So all that we need to make society good has been written down many ages ago, but it seems we have not read it. So for there to be justice in a city, each class should perform its proper function. Man has different parts. Man has different parts. Man has different parts. Man has emotional parts and appetitive side. Man has emotional side and appetitive side. Appetitive side. And then the spiritual parts. So you have the emotional part, and appetitive part, and the spiritual part. Okay, so man has the rational side, not emotional, rational. Man has a rational side used for thinking. Man has the rational side used for thinking, not emotional. Rational side used for thinking. The appetitive side for desires. So the appetitive part is for what? For bodily desires. Bodily desires. And then there's the spirited part is for emotions. The spiritual part or the spirited side is for emotion. So these three parts have to work harmoniously for a perfect life. One has to control, regulate all the parts and make them work. One part should not rule over the other. In fact, it is the thinking part, the rational part, that should regulate the other parts. The thinking part that should regulate the other parts. Your thinking, a rational part should be able to regulate your appetitive part, and the spiritual part in order for you to live a good life. One is said to be just when each of the three parts of the soul performs its function. Justice then is a balance of the soul's parts, and injustice, the imbalance. Book 5. Despite the fact that Plato was misogynistic in his comments and ideas, despite the fact that Plato was misogynistic in his comments and ideas, he said that guardian women should perform the same jobs as male guardians. But he then said that guardian women should perform the same role as the male guardians. Maybe at that level of nobility, nothing more. The best guardian men should mate with the best guardian women. Marriage should be class-based. Marry within your class. That's what Plato was saying. Marry within your class. The best guardian men should mate with the best guardian women, and that is to produce strong, intelligent children for society. Alright, so even now in marriage, people still go to do medical tests to know the right mates in certain situations so as not to produce imbecile or sick children. Okay? Guardian men are free to have marriage relations with many women so as to increase the chances of having children of similar nature. Once the children are born, they are taken away from the parents to a place designated by the state where the children will be raised without knowing their parents anymore. This is to avoid the parents from having bad influence on the children, because Plato believed that the parents usually indulge their children, spoil them with motherly and fatherly affection, instead of raising them objectively to be useful to the state. Right? So to avoid that bad influence, when the child is born and is weaned, should be taken to the education center where they will not see the parents again. So that was the education of children in the ideal republic. The children are raised to function in the state, away from the negative influence, the spoiled influences of their parents. So imagine you growing up without knowing your parents. You only know the state and the leader. Then parents will take all children as their own. If you see any child in the state, it's your child. It doesn't have to be yours. After all, you might not even recognize your own again. So the comment says that this kind of state creates room for incestuous relationships, since you might not know who your sister is or who your brother is at the end of the day, because there's really no family, right? There's a possibility of marrying one sister without knowing. Then the model of a just city cannot be actualized until philosophers rule as kings, or kings become philosophers. the best people to rule are philosophers, according to Plato. Either the king becomes a philosopher or the philosopher becomes the king. Otherwise, society will not work well. By that, it means that only the best educated citizens should be leaders. People who can think for the state. Book 6. In book 6, Plato gives more reasons why philosophers should be leaders. That's why intellectuals should be leaders. But we live in a society where intellectuals don't rule anymore. Only thugs rule. Those who carry gun. Alright? Are the rulers. So how can that kind of society work? It won't work. In this book, the sophists are seen as bad teachers. Plato says the sophists as bad teachers. The sophists were known for their peculiar mode of arguments. They were paid teachers, and they aimed to convince people by appealing to their emotions and not minding the fallacies in their logic, in their reasoning. So that's why perhaps they are called bad teachers. They kind of corrupt the education of philosophers, turning them into bad ones. In this book, the education of the philosopher is described. They should learn what is good. They should learn what is good. Book 7. Book 7. In book 7, we have the allegory of the cave. Allegory of the cave. Book 7, we have the allegory of the cave. Allegory is a story that teaches a lesson. A group of prisoners are chained to a wall in a cave, facing a blank wall. A fire behind them casts shadows on the wall in front of them. These shadows are actual people passing behind the prisoners. These shadows are reality to the prisoners, but it is not actual reality. Plato uses the shadows to represent the perception of sense experience, while the real human beings represent reason. So that's allegory of the cave, where the prisoners see shadows as reality, whereas that was not reality. Okay? Plato uses the shadows to represent perception of sense experience, sense that the sense experience is not real. What we see in the real world and the material world is not real. Alright? It is just a shadow of what is real in the spiritual world, which is reason. Alright? Which is the unseen. True education is turning the soul away from shadows and visible objects to true understanding of forms, world of forms. So our education should make us look beyond what we see to the importance of imagination and the intellect. Education of the philosopher proceeds from poetry, music, and physical education. Like other guardians to mathematics, arithmetic and number, plain geometry, and solid geometry. That's why even from secondary school they will teach you all these subjects. They don't only teach you art, entertainment, physical education, they also teach you mathematics, science, and all the other things before you choose the field that you want to belong to. So the education of the guardian will take 15 years of practical political training after learning logic, learning mathematics, and the other things. So you could see that it takes a long time to produce a leader. Okay, so because of time, we are going to pause here till next time.